All right, what are we doing today? It is a transmission service on the 2000 F-150, as you can see by this mess over here. Now, there's a million how to service your transmission videos on YouTube already for these 10th generation F-Series trucks. This has the 4R70W transmission, and I'm not gonna go over the whole procedure because like I said, there's a bunch of videos already, and I'll link to what I think is the best one in the description. By like Ford Tech Macaluco, something like that. So that's going to show you how to go and drop the pan, and that's how you get all the fluid out. I'll just come under here real quick. So there's the pan. Basically, you're just going to remove all those pan bolts. Just do all of the side ones and the front ones, and then you'll let the pan kind of hang like this towards the front, and it'll drain all that fluid out because there is no drain bolt on these. There are like aftermarket ones that you can get that have a drain bolt for future use. Now, it is kind of a pain because they always got to put stuff like 1 centimeter where it's pain in the ass, but if they just moved it like 1 centimeter back, it would be the easiest job in the world. There's this cross member right here, and getting to these back bolts is a real pain. But it can be done without removing the cross member. I just used, I had to use like a long deep wall 10 millimeter socket on a, what's it called? A swivel. And then with an extension out here, and I was able to get to it. But anyways, eventually you're gonna get that pan down, and then you're just gonna clean it out, clean the magnet, and reinstall it. The important things that I just want to point out under here is if it's the first time this has ever been done, then you're going to have the original Ford gasket, and that's reusable, and you can just reuse that. And it's going to be better quality than any gasket that comes in most of the kits, unless the kit specifically says with a reusable gasket, rather than like a one-time use gasket. And then the important thing here is this is like an aluminum valve body. And so the torque spec is very important. You don't want to over tighten these. It's 11 foot-pounds at the maximum on these bolts. And you want to do it in the crisscross pattern so that everything is goes on evenly. You might be wondering, well, how do I know if it's the first time that this service has ever been done? And the answer is this yellow plug right there, this little piece of plastic you'll find in the pan when you drop it, if it's the first time that it's ever been done. That was something that came during assembly, and when they assembled the transmissions, like installed them in the cars, put the, I think it's, I don't know, I think it might be the dipstick or something, it pushed that out. And so you know that if that's in your pan, it's never been done before. And then the filter, simply you just pull it out. It's just using, that's the only thing holding it into the valve body, this O-ring right here, just pressure on it. So you just pull this out. Make sure to look up into the valve body if you don't have this O-ring or this gasket and it stayed behind. You need to carefully pull that out of the valve body with like a pick. Mine came out still on the old filter, so good to go there. You can see how disgusting this is. Look at all that. This was, of course, original, as you can see by the yellow plug. 125,000 miles, so not a ton of miles. I still feel really good that, you know, new fluid will be good for this transmission. It was running pretty good. It just had a hard downshift into third, so that's what made me investigate the fluid condition. And that's where all these videos end. It's just take off the pan and do a drain and fill. But in my opinion, like, that's kind of useless. Like, don't get me wrong, it's better than nothing, but this is a 14 quart system. So, and you're gonna get 5 quarts out, maybe a little tiny bit more than that by doing just dropping the pan. And even if you take the bolt out of the bottom, there's like a rubber plug at the torque converter, and you drain that out, you might get an initial 2 or 3. Like, you still got a lot of dirty fluid in this transmission system that you're not getting out. So that's why I wanted to make this little video to add on to all of the other videos on YouTube servicing these vehicles, is my method, which is just how every Montero is like this. And so pretty much every vehicle that has an external transmission cooler, you can do this same job. So we're gonna go right up here to where the transmission cooler is, and we're gonna disconnect the return line, and that's gonna get the rest of the fluid out. So the first thing you wanna do your pan, drain, and then you wanna fill back through the dipstick what you got out. So like 5 quarts. And it's okay to do a little more here, like 6 quarts, for example, because when we start this car, it's going to start pumping it out. So let me take you down below. All right, now we're under the car at the very front where the transmission cooler is. And what you want to do is the return line, this metal line on the very far passenger side, like here's the frame rail, and you can disconnect this black hose that was right there, just one hose clamp. And then I wasn't sure how it was going to flow, so I just, like I wasn't 100% sure that that was the return. So I had this big hose on this end, but you don't need that. You could just pinch that shut, or it doesn't really matter. But just to be safe, I've got this big hose going down into a bucket. But what's going to happen is you're going to need to put a 3/8 inch hose ID. God damn, I can't talk at all. 3/8 ID hose on the metal side, and it's best if it's clear, and then that goes into your bucket. And then you're going to get a buddy to start the car, and it's going to start pumping out everything that you haven't gotten with your drain and fill. All the old fluid is going to come out into your bucket, and you're going to keep an eye on it as you pour in new fluid into the dipstick. So, you know, you don't want to let the transmission get low on fluid. So even if you start out with a little bit extra, like add an extra quart before you start this, just to give yourself some wiggle room, but basically just keep an eye on your bucket level, be adding in fresh ATF, and then when you see that it starts to run red and like clean, then your buddy can shut off the car, and now you've done a full fluid exchange and you've gotten out all 14 quarts out of this transmission. While you're down here, if you want to install an inline transmission filter, I'll put a link to that, and you would just need to get the 3/8 size, and I mean verify the diameter of this line before you buy it, but then you can just install that here on this hose. Like you could cut this hose with an extra hose clamp, and then you can put the inline filter like right here, and just make sure it's flowing in the correct direction. Again, fluid is coming out of this way and hooking up and going that way. So keep that in mind. So now we're going to go ahead and add it in the fluid as it's pumping it out. You want to make sure that the vehicle is running for this step in park on level ground. And it comes out pretty quick out of that hose at the bottom of the transmission cooler. So you do need to keep an eye on it. You don't want your transmission to get too low. So you pretty much want to be having like a steady pour of the transmission fluid in as you're watching your bucket down below. And the fluid that we're going with is the Valvoline Max Life. This vehicle calls for Mercon V, and this is compatible with that, and it's also like just very high quality fluid and super affordable as well. And another thing, if it ever starts to get like away from you, don't hesitate to just have your assistant turn off the engine. Like, you're not going to mess anything up in this procedure by turning it off and then being like, oh, okay, well, it's still coming out dirty and I've still got a few more quarts of fluid, so let's run it for a little longer. Like, you're not going to hurt anything. Like, it's not going to mess up the steps. So, you know, the worst thing you can do is run it dry or run it too low on fluid. So don't hesitate to turn it off. Anyways, after that's done, you feel good about the fluid condition that's in the vehicle. You've cycled a bunch of it out. Like, I took out pretty much like 14 quarts basically, and then I had a quart left over. And then you want to get your level on your dipstick. And it's super annoying to get accurate readings on transmission dipsticks because, you know, the tube is going to be all covered in fluid, and then you go and you insert this and it's going to look like, oh, it's completely full. But it's not. It's just the fluid that it scraped on as it went down the dipstick tube. So let it settle for a while before you take your final reading. Let it run for like a few minutes, and then clean off your dipstick really well, and then insert it all the way, let it sit for a few seconds before you pull it out and read it. And if it's, once you're at this add section, once you see fluid showing up on here, then you go into the cab and cycle through the gears. Just like put it from park, put it into reverse, let it sit there for 10 seconds, move it into neutral, let it sit there for 10 seconds, go into drive, and then work your way back up into park, and then come back out and check your levels again. And then eventually you just want to obviously get it into the hot section when your vehicle's up to temperature. Like once your vehicle's been running long enough, which it probably will be by the point of you exchanging all the fluid, cycling through the gears, adding, you know. So once it's the transmission's at temperature, you want to be in this hot range right here. My only other tip that I wanted to give you guys is I like to put in lube guard. This is like an amazing additive that solves so many problems in transmissions, from, you know, poor shifting, noise, all kinds of stuff. I've used it in a ton of vehicles. Now, there are a bunch of different lube guards. There's like this original red, there's like an ultimate or premium, I forget what they call it, and then there's one specifically for Fords. And so I wasn't sure what to use, because I've got a Ford here and they have one specific for Ford. So I called them and they said for what I'm describing, like just like a hard downshift into third and just doing like general transmission service, that they advised that I use the original red bottle. And they said because of the capacity of the system, one bottle is good for 10 quarts of transmission fluid, and this is a 14 quart system. So a bottle and a half is what I would need, or they said you would be fine with using 2 full bottles, that it won't cause any problems. So in that final step, you know, where I'm getting my levels right, I'm adding in the lube guard. Oh, I almost forgot. Now, sometimes you do a transmission service, and if your service intervals were missed, like way past due, it's a possibility with this one, but let's say I've got 200,000 miles and a transmission service has never been done, then sometimes the transmission can shift worse than before you started. And so my advice to you would be, make sure that when you're doing your drains and all the buckets that you're collecting your old transmission fluid, make sure you clean them really well before you drain fluid into them, right? And then save them, put them into like the clean jugs of the new fluid. And worst case, you try lube guard and additives like that, and your transmission is worse off after doing all this work, you can always drain the old stuff out, drain the new stuff out of the vehicle, put the old stuff back in, and that'll get you back to where you were, basically. That's a very extreme situation to happen, but it's not uncommon if a transmission has been neglected and it needs that disgusting old viscous fluid for it to shift. And you might just have a minor problem, like in this case, a hard downshift into third, but the new fluid creates something bigger, like missing a gear entirely, for example. So I always keep the old stuff on hand for, you know, a few months, a few thousand miles, just till I make sure everything is running great and shifting great for a while. I will put links to everything in this video that I'm using in the description, as well as to that much more detailed video of doing the drain and fill that I mentioned. But that's really it, you guys. I just wanted to point out this really important stuff. I don't know why every video stops at a drain and fill, because I think it's a waste of time, especially on a vehicle like this where the pan doesn't have a drain bolt. You know, it's not like a lot of other cars where you can do a drain and fill like 3-4 times, but at least it's easy. At least there's a drain bolt in the pan. Not this one. You don't want to be dropping that pan 3-4 times. Trust me, it's not fun, especially with that cross member in the way. Like, it's a pain. So that's it, you guys. Thanks for watching.